When you started your company, a big part of the reason you did it is because you wanted freedom. The freedom to set your own hours, work when you wanted to work, and not have to ask anybody when you wanted to take a couple of days off. But even if you're successful on paper, you find that most days you work more hours with less freedom and more headaches than you ever had when you were working for somebody else. And the worst part about it is that you can't really put your finger on exactly why that is. It's not like you're unmotivated. You probably look at what you're doing as some of the most important work of your life. And it's not like you're lazy either. My bet is you're working harder than almost anybody you know. Of course, you're smart and driven and capable, but despite all of that, you probably get home at night, and when your spouse asks what you did that day, you don't really have a good answer. The best you can come up with is that you were busy. Phone calls, emails, team meetings, and putting out the same fire you've already put out 6 times this month. Part of the problem is that's exactly what you were told were the signs that you were doing it right. You hear so much noise about how being the owner means you have to grind out long days, to the point where the number of hours you worked in a week became kind of a status symbol, a way to measure yourself against other people. At the beginning, you didn't have much of a choice because it was all on you. You're the one who got every customer, handled every part of fulfillment, answered the phones, got the mail, and 100 other things you only realized needed to be done after you jumped into this thing with both feet. And you did it well. That's why you beat incredibly long odds and survived long enough to start hiring employees, which came with an entirely different level of complexity because even though you brought in people to help, it still feels like you keep all the real work. You still have to answer the hard questions. You still have to make the final decision. You still have to step in when something breaks. And somewhere along the way, without ever even meaning to, you built a business that can't function without you. Not because your team's bad or because your clients are exceptionally difficult. It's because every important thing still gravitates its way back to you. Every decision, every exception, every fire. And what started out as freedom slowly turned into responsibility. And responsibility turned into obligation. And obligation turned itself into a kind of invisible prison. And here's the part nobody tells you. You didn't do anything wrong. Everything you did made perfect sense. In the beginning, speed mattered more than structure. Doing it yourself was faster than explaining it, and fixing it yourself was easier than training somebody else. Making the call yourself felt safer than risking a bad decision. And those instincts are exactly what helped you survive. The problem is, those skills that helped you get to 7 figures are the same skills that keep you stuck working so many hours. What made you successful? That's now what's making you tired. Because the business grew up, but your role never really changed. You're still playing startup founder in a company that now needs an operator. And so your days get filled with movement, but no real progress. You're busy, there's no doubt about that, but not necessarily busy in a way that's moving the business forward. And maybe that's why it feels so heavy. Not because you're not working hard, you've always worked hard. It feels heavy because deep down, you know your time is being spent on things that shouldn't need you anymore. Things you've solved years ago, problems you shouldn't still be personally handling. And yet, here you are, answering questions your team should be able to answer, approving decisions they should be able to make on their own, and putting out fires that shouldn't even exist. And here's the weird part only founders will understand. PCU feels proud of being needed, because if everything still needs you, it proves you matter. It proves you're important. But it also means you can't step away. You can't take any real time off, you can't disconnect, and you can't trust that things will run without you. So even when you're at home, part of you is still at work. And after a while, success starts to feel a lot like a job you can't quit. So what are we supposed to do about all of this? You don't need to work harder. At some level, you know that more effort isn't your answer. And you don't need a new product that's just going to make things more complex and harder to run. And you don't need another marketing strategy, because if anything you've heard in this video sounds familiar, that's going to be like pouring gasoline on a fire. What really needs to change here is the way decisions flow inside your company, because right now, everything flows up to you, and until this changes, your hours won't change. Here's a simple test. For 1 week, just pay attention to how many questions land on your desk that somebody else could have answered. And you don't have to do this perfectly, just well enough will make this work. Fair warning though, most founders, they're shocked by the number that comes across their desk. So here's a lever you can pull this week. Lay the first brick in what I call a decision firewall. The idea here is to build a layer of protection between you and decisions that should never hit your desk. Instead of being the answer machine, start setting guardrails and limits on how far your team can go to solve the problems on their own. So guardrails here are things like SOPs. And limitations are usually things like money and like contracts. The irony here is that the amount of freedom you have as the founder is directly proportional to the amount of freedom your team has to make decisions on their own. The decision firewall doesn't mean you're out though. Questions that don't belong on your desk, they're still gonna land there once in a while. And this is where you have to fight your instincts because you can't just answer it. That's how you got trapped in the first place. You have to learn to redirect it and guide them to their own answer by responding with questions of your own. Like, what do you think we should do? Or who owns this? Or, hey, if I was on vacation right now and you couldn't ask me, what decision would you make? At first, this is gonna feel painfully slow and uncomfortable. Stick with it though, because over a few weeks, you're gonna see something shift. You'll watch your team start thinking for themselves more often, and you'll see problems get solved without you. And you'll notice that your calendar stops filling up with small things because the goal isn't to work less. It's to give yourself the freedom to work on things that actually move the business forward. And when that happens, I promise you'll start to feel something you haven't felt in a while. That feeling is called relief. And you'll feel it because you're finally building a company to run without you having to be in every single room. And the moment you realize the company doesn't need you for everything is the moment you start getting your freedom back. Now, it doesn't happen all at once. It happens piece by piece over time. And if anything you've heard in this feels uncomfortably familiar, good. I want you to understand that you're not alone on an island. You just built a business that outgrew the role that you're still playing. And that next level you're looking for, the one you talk about, you're not gonna find it by working harder. You're gonna find it by letting go of the parts of the business that were never supposed to be yours forever anyway. But we'll fix that piece in the next video.